All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? And welcome to our second edition of Colored Conversations.
Hmm.
Myself, Keenan Tyler, I pastor Coastal Shore Seventh Day Adventist Church in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and the Cedars of Lebanon Church, Seventh Day Adventist Church in Chesapeake, Virginia. And we have a special guest, another special guest, my good friend Chris. So, Chris, can you just tell us about yourself and where you come from?
Yeah. Christopher Lowen. I grew up in a little town in Washington State called Walla Walla. And there's Seventh Day Adventist University there. So I grew up in that town. And I pastored there for about 10 years before my family and I just moved to Southern California. And we've been here for a year now in Redlands, which is almost in the blue zone, but not quite. But we're 2 miles away from Loma Linda, California, which is kind of the where the Adventist University is and all that. So I've been pastoring here for a year. My wife is named Paige. She's a nurse, and then I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, 2 boys, Finn and Sawyer. And we're just making it through 2020. We're kind of looking forward to 2021.
Right.
But we're that's kind of us.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Well, thank you for I was about to say coming on the show, but thank you for joining me in this adventure. You know, with all that's going on in the world today. Just wanted the my mic on mute. Just really wanted to have this conversation with you. So my first question, and this is live. This is live, so you may have to hear the doorbell ring, apparently, but this is live. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask you my first question. All that's taking place just racially today in the racial climate, our racial climate. What are your thoughts about what's taking place today?
Hmm. Man, I've had a number of different reactions, and it's kind of been varied, but it's been very intense for me. Like whatever the reactions are, there's a part of me that feels scared about uh, what is gonna happen or what could happen. This feels to me like a bigger moment, more awareness, more raw emotion, more reaction, more mobilization than in 2014, 2015, and maybe even more than. And I know that it's a different topic, but the the Occupy protests after the recession, that was kind of a moment that this feels like bigger, and certainly seems like it's more politicized or more partisanship, maybe you could say, which is concerning. So I'm scared about it like blowing up in terms that, like, I'm scared of a war or and at the same time I'm also hopeful that maybe this is a bigger moment, and maybe we can find a way to make substantive changes, and I guess I feel like it's going to be a process where we keep chipping away at this. It's especially our problems with racism in the country I feel like are part of our heritage. It's like in the fabric of society. And I've heard people say that racism is our original sin, and that resonates with me. And if that's true, then it's probably something that we're going to keep tangling with. But this feels like a moment where we could get to another level, or take another step toward righting some of the wrongs, and if not that, at least setting the platform for a more equitable future. So I'm scared, I'm hopeful, I'm confused. The amount of gaslighting is hard to navigate, and I can only imagine what that's like for other folks. But I know for me, the gaslighting it caused a lot of confusion for me, and like just the way the way that we are able to absorb stories on the internet. Leads me to feel just completely overwhelmed. There's so much information and there's misinformation, and then also just overwhelming. Like there's one Twitter thread I was looking at, or I've been kind of following, and this guy has something like 300 videos just from the last couple of weeks of questionable. I'll say, I'll give a charitable word, questionable policing during the protests. Like that. I don't even know how you process 300 videos in a week of violence from people that represent our government. And yeah. So those those are kind of a lot of, I guess, my feelings or thoughts. I guess that isn't. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have a follow up on that, or?
well. So you said, well, you're scared, you're confused, and hopeful all at the same time, which I'm sure a lot of people are. But you said something earlier. You said that this is a little different. This seems to be a little different than in times past, because this is not the first time with the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Mark Arbery. This is not the first time someone suffered an injustice has been done. But it seems like something just something different, and I've been trying to wrap my mind around that as well. And I think part of it it's got to be maybe the coronavirus, and everybody's on lockdown, and so in a sense now more people are in a position where they can see things that maybe they was oblivious to before, and that's the only thing I can think of, because what else is different? Oh, the coronavirus. And so now, like you just mentioned about seeing on the Twitter feed 300 videos about policing, but like to me, unfortunately, I'm not surprised that somebody put a camera on it, so I'm not surprised where in your sense you're like, wow, that's like a shocker. So it's definitely something going on here. And so that's why that's one of the reasons why I want to have a conversation, this color conversation, to see how white people thinking. And so maybe see how I'm thinking. So, because if we don't talk about this, then what happens? We just go stay in our own bubble,
right?
Stay in our own bubble.
So
So
it seems like that's a lot of, maybe not a lot, but that seems like a problem to me, and just in my experience, my congregation is predominantly white. It's definitely a more diverse bunch down here than probably my congregation in Walla Walla. But I feel like there's just not, I don't want to say lack of awareness, because I feel like it's grown in the last few years, but certainly I think that there is surprise still, in a way that for people of color, it maybe is not a surprise. I know that for me, I feel like I think that you're probably right, and I've heard a lot of people say that the the coronavirus and the lockdown and all this stuff kind of potentially contributed to the amount of people on the streets and the emotion and the attention and all that. And there's probably truth to that. That makes sense.
Mhm.
I also feel like, and maybe this is just me speaking from my experience, but after the protests in Ferguson and through that moment, I had some friends who live in St. Louis area and who I, interacted with and talked about what they were seeing, and they were out on the streets. And, from that time, I made a concerted effort personally to educate myself, honestly, and to read more and to listen more and to read books. And so I've done a lot of, I feel like my awareness and my empathy and my appreciation for racial disparities in the US has grown in the last 5 years. And so whereas,
let me ask you this, man. So where was it? Where was it before, and where is it now?
I think in 2015, I think in 2015, I saw, heard the stories and saw the videos, and I kind of had the perspective of, well, this may have not had as much to do with race as some people are saying, and I could see how, maybe, like, I think that I was kind of more middle of the road. I don't know if that's yeah. So I'm
Kind of
I'm cognizant
lukewarm
that
about it.
I was maybe lukewarm about it, and I feel embarrassed to say that, because I see now how even having that perspective, for someone who's in a position of suffering from systematic injustice,
Yeah.
that could be cruel to hear someone say, or especially to hear someone who's like a pastor or whatever. And I would never dream of saying something like that about like, say, a victim of rape, where I wouldn't say, wow, they kind of, like, no. So I feel embarrassed admitting that, but I think that I was more in that place then. I don't, I mean, don't take too much from that. I think that I was at least somewhat woke at the time, but
Right.
I have done a lot of reading and a lot of listening, and had a lot of conversations, and I've had some experiences in leadership, and I think I've grown in my, well, I consider it growth. I guess some people might not, but
So now you're woke. You're woke now.
My point of view is different now,
Right.
and I don't think that there is. I don't have any question whatsoever about the systems in place that we have created as a society, to I don't know how you would say it, to hurt people of color, and that are unequal. And whether you talk about, and I guess I worry about some of the narrative getting lost in this moment. Like, are we? I mean, I think that policing and police practices and policies, and the weaponization with military type equipment and all that, I think is certainly part of the problem. But I guess I feel like the issue is bigger. Like, you have to look at the court system and people's implicit biases, and hiring and firing, and education. Not like it's I feel like the issue that we're facing as a country that we need to deal with in terms of race is much bigger than just police.
It's the
Although,
whole entire system.
yeah, like police is certainly part of it, but I'm a little bit worried in this moment that we're getting too hyper focused on police brutality, which like, I mean, compare America's death rate to other countries. We our police kill something like 1,000 people a year compared to some European countries where it's like 4.
Right.
And of course their populations are bigger, but I mean that is it's not bigger by that margin. So I mean, like, obviously we have an issue that we need to work on. We have a problem with gun. I mean, there's so many things, but I'm worried about that the conversation around race getting lost. So I guess I feel like at this moment that, and this may be just like super self-centric, Chris, so but I feel like there are more people now who are like me, who in 2015 didn't know much and hadn't read much, who in the last 5 years have read stuff and have studied and have looked at statistics and looked at studies. And whereas in 2015 there may have been skepticism at the statement that there are systems of racism that are set up in the U.S. I feel like that is less in question now amongst a lot of people. Obviously not everyone, but I feel like a lot of folks that, I mean, when I didn't protest in 2015, but I was out in my city on Saturday, and it was unquestionably what I had to do and needed to do. And part of that is due to me being more educated. So I guess that's, and like I said, that could be totally self-centered, why I feel like it's different, but it feels different to me. And I don't know.
Well, a few things. So the first one I ask you, what books did you read? What books were that you read that helped open up your eyes?
One of I'm gonna have to open up my reading history. One of the ones that has stuck with me and that I've actually read twice is So You Want to Talk About Race? By what's her name? Ijeoma Ulo. Yeah, that one knocked my socks off. Raising White Kids.
Wow, that's a powerful title. Raising White Kids, okay.
Yeah, Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America. And I mentioned last night when we talked that, we moved to California, and one of the things that was attractive to us about moving to Southern California was exposing our kids to all sorts of different people just living in a more diverse environment. And so I read some novels. I'm going through.
Well, while you finding that, let me ask you another question. So you would agree, just going off what you said, that racism is systemic in our country, right? Okay. So that's in society, but what about in the church? Do you see systemic racism in our church? Feel free to answer that one.
Yeah.
How so, Chris?
So we're part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. 17 General Conference presidents in our history, every one of them white male. That doesn't seem by chance, but it seems like that would be against the odds, especially given that, at least, especially today, by percentages, white men are a fraction of the, white men are a minority in terms of the church membership population. So, you know, that's one that to me kind of jumps off the page. But of course, there's more nuanced ones as well. Hiring and firing. You know, on the West Coast, we don't have the regional conferences. Not that I'm, you know, weighing in. Like I've lived on the West Coast my whole life, so I don't have, you know, context or history or whatever. It seems to me that the fact that we have regional conferences would indicate that there's some issue or problem with racism. Right. Now, I know that I'm Adventist enough to know that there's a pretty robust and diverse conversation around the role of regional conferences, and, you know, how useful they are, how unuseful they are, whatever. But the fact that they exist to me speaks to some problem, whether that's current or historical or whatever. I feel like a lot of aspects we might label as racism in the church, or problems with race, are things that are just reflected from the culture. Right. So I feel like a lot of the conversations that a wider culture is having around race are very similar to the conversations we're having amongst church members in the church.
Well, then let me ask you another question. What about, because you said 5 years ago, that's when you begin to educate yourself about just things that's going on in America as pertaining to race.
I wouldn't say I began at that point, but I would say that I made a concerted effort to read every month, you know, or read, maybe not every month, but read books every year written by Black authors and written from perspectives that are different from the ones that I automatically. So I made an intentional effort to read and to learn and to listen.
So what would you say to because it's not just people, it's not just white people. It's not the proper Caucasian Adventists or Caucasian Christians.
I don't know. I struggle with that.
Right. But there's also some black people of color who even though they live in America, maybe they have made it to a certain tax bracket, maybe middle class, and they are almost blind to these issues as well. So as a pastor, well, not as a Christian, what would you say to all of those black, white, and all in between who just remain silent in these times? What would you say to them?
I think I would have to say, whatever I say, I think I would have to say it to myself, because I struggle with how much to say and how unvarnished to be, and like I kind of said, I feel like I've been changing and growing in my perspective, especially on this, you know, in this issue. And so I feel maybe less confident about speaking to it with like pointedly than I would with some other issue. Like, you know, I feel more, or in the past at least, I felt much more strongly about speaking without reservation to you know, God's love for you is absolute, and there's nothing you could do to make him love you less. Like I would go to the mat for that, you know, that's without question to me. And I think there in the past, especially maybe, you know, 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't be able to speak with that kind of conviction around my thoughts, about systemic racism, like that I just expressed. So I feel like there may be some degree of where people are not willing to speak clearly because maybe they don't totally know themselves, they're not totally convicted themselves. And I think that there's also part of my experience at right now is, as a society, and especially as a postmodern society, we deconstruct everything, and we deconstruct it like really stinking fast now. And like it feels like no matter what someone says, you could be taken to task for it and misunderstood. And so I think that there's a certain amount of fear even amongst those who might, like, just speaking for the white community, like I feel like there's a certain amount of fear amongst people who would consider themselves to be allies in this conversation, who are afraid of speaking out in ways that would be hurtful or ways that would be misunderstood, and that those feelings of fear are themselves deconstructed, and criticized. So I think there's some of that. I know that for me, my personality, have you done much work on Enneagram, the Enneagram personality thing? The Enneagram?
No.
Okay, well, in my personality, I'm like a peacemaker, right? I want to build bridges and make connections, and I'm all about empathy and inclusion. And
Yeah, you're a pastor, man. You're a true pastor. You got pastor's heart.
Right. So sometimes that can run amok for me, which is I so deeply want to bring everyone along and want to avoid divisions, and that I don't say anything at all. And that's a risk. And there are moments where I'm really proud of being able to navigate difficult stuff and bring everyone along. And then there are moments where I've also been, I don't know if ashamed is the right word, but where I've been convicted that, even if saying XYZ is going to lead some people to feel uncomfortable, it's my obligation to do that on behalf of, a person or group of people who are being hurt.
Yeah, that's the prophetic voice.
Yeah.
Right.
But thinking about that, like the prophetic voice versus like the, inclusive, inclusive restorative voice, I much more live over here. But I know that there are moments when, as a pastor or as a leader, where now you have to take a stand, or have a position, or so I feel like there's a lot of different stuff that goes into what people say or what they don't say, or what how they express themselves. I think another dynamic that a lot of folks have, and I'm going to try to not get myself into too much trouble, but like depending on, and this is again speaking for the white community, and you chose
yeah, speak for the entire white community. Yes.
Right, exactly. I think there can be fear around family tension, and there's different points of view and different disagreements.
What would be those other points of view, Chris?
Well, I think from sort of, well, I don't really know if there's any racism to abject racism, very explicit racism. And I was someone who I grew up in Walla Walla, which is like very, very, very white. And I've made the observations, many times, that if you grow up in that city, as an Adventist, it's possible to like grow up and not really have any meaningful relationships with people that are outside of your faith community, or even outside your racial or cultural community. I mean, it's it's possible to grow up and to just, only know people that are kind of like you. And I say possible because I know that it's not necessarily the norm, or it's not necessarily what's expected, but it's possible. And so I know that for my family, we're like the overwhelming majority of friends that we had growing up and other family, like I don't think that I've had any family members, at least not any close family members that I grew up in Walla Walla with, who married people from a different race. And so there's a little exposure, and I heard a lot of stuff that is not okay. And
wait, let's park that. Let's park that right there. So, and this is why this is why this is why we have you on here. So, you heard a lot of stuff. So I'm so interested. What kind of things, because racism, it has to be taught. White supremacy, it has to be taught. So even in the faith community, you're telling me that you have heard some things growing up. So I know you don't want to put those people out there, but just in general, there, Chris, what are some of the type of things that you have heard? So we can kind of.
I would say, man, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. The folks that I'm thinking of are.
You should know the truth, Chris. The truth shall make you free.
Yeah.
You got freedom, man. You're free.
Yeah, right. When I was saying that, I was more thinking about some of my family members.
Okay.
And thinking back on some of the things that I've heard that over the years as a child or whatever, be it jokes or phrases or whatever.
The micro and macro aggressions and
were things that were I would say more commonly said by people that were not actively engaged in church.
Okay.
Or if they're somehow connected with church, were only ancillary. I feel like amongst folks who are associated with the church, the types of things that I saw that I would label as being racist today would be more subtle than like the overt stuff.
Well, what is it? Come on, give me an example of what you heard back then. Give me an example.
How
about this? To be fair, you give me an example, and I give you an example of what I heard.
All right.
All right.
Let me think.
Well, don't give me nothing light now, Chris. Come on.
Man. Oh, you're killing me.
What was the first thing that came to your mind? That's the one that you probably should have went with.
Well, there's a euphemism that I had a relative use frequently for Brazil nuts. You know what a Brazil nut is?
No.
Like they're like these big. It's a large nut. Actually, I learned that it's the most radioactive food on the planet.
Okay.
And they come in a big, large shell, and they look like a toe, or someone's toe.
Yeah, I see it. I looked it up. Okay.
So I don't feel comfortable saying they would say N-word toe.
Okay. Gotcha.
That
Okay.
was just what it was called, like on the table. You put it on the table, and that's what they would, play to. Yeah.
Okay.
So
All
that's the
right.
first one that comes to mind.
Okay.
I had a relative who had what he called, and this is not this is racist toward Latinos, but he had a knife that he called a Mexican credit card.
Mm.
And that wasn't like one time. That was what it was called.
Right.
Yeah.
Mercy. Mercy.
And I don't know at what point I realized how awful that was.
Mhm.
But it certainly wasn't. I mean, I certainly thought it was funny until I was probably in college. I don't know.
Wow.
Just lots of euphemisms, stuff like that. Just labels for things that are deeply racist. Yeah, there's a long list.
Yeah, but we'll go with those two. We'll stick
Okay.
with those two.
I think another.
Oh, you got more. Okay.
Well, one, like some of the implicit things would be like things that would happen at restaurants, or
Like what? What do you mean?
like condescension to a server who is not white.
Mm.
So instead of, and that may have not been like exclusively related to race. That may have been more closely related to class, or a person's position if they were a server. But frequently I've been a part of moments where a server was treated as less than human in subtle ways, but in ways that as a child or as a preteen didn't bother me, or maybe would have even felt good at the time. And then later as an adult, things that have felt pretty horrible and not appropriate. I remember in the last few years, I won't give too many details, I went out to eat with some people, we'll say.
Well, hold on, Chris. Let me pose you real quick. If there's anybody that have any questions, you got any questions, please just put it in the chat as well. If you have any questions, I should have said that in the beginning. Just put it in the chat. If you got any questions, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, I was gonna say I went out to eat, let's say in the last 10 years, with some people, and the way that they just subtly belittled the server who was of a different race than me and the people I was at the restaurant with, so disturbed my wife and I that we the next day actually went back to that place. We baked several dozen cookies and took them to the restaurant with a card to apologize for the way, because this was a place that we frequently go to,
Right.
or at the time at least we frequently went to, and we kind of knew that. I mean, we didn't know their names or anything, but they recognized us, we recognized them, we loved going to the place. And so we actually went back and apologized, and they were embarrassed. They they said, oh no, it wasn't anything, and I have no idea if they like really didn't notice or what, but we felt terrible. So I've made a shift from a place where that kind of behavior didn't bother me at all, or even maybe felt good, to horror. I need to do something about it. And of course,
Did you go back?
did,
The people who did it that you were with, did you tell them that what they did was wrong?
that's where I still have room to grow. Yeah. And we didn't say anything in the moment.
Right. Right.
And that's not good enough.
Right. Right. Well, yeah. Thank you for your honesty. And yeah, because when we see it, we have to. We definitely, when they say in the airport, you see something, say something, right?
Yeah.
We gotta speak up and say something about it. Wow. Okay. Well, I said that I would give you one, right? I said I
Yeah.
would give you one. But really and truthfully, growing up in New York City, multicultural, but everybody stays to themselves. Um, but the main thing that I would hear is that is that is that white people will stab you in the back.
Hmm.
So I grew up. However, I had white friends. I went to school with. So, but I was always told when you get older and you get in corporate America, they will stab you in the back. So
Hmm.
be careful. So I've always, not always, but as a kid, you hear that, you begin to look like, whoa. You kind of like caution. What's really going on?
Yeah.
You know. So but again, what helped me out was number one, just growing up. I had kids in my neighborhood who were white, so that helped. And also just you getting Chris, you still there? Oh, there you go. But just getting older, and
Let me.
going to
I'm gonna.
you good? You did?
All right. I'm
Yeah,
back. I'm back.
yeah, you
I'm
did.
good.
So just just going to college. I went to college out of state, and that also helped me to broaden my worldview, to see it. Then of course the most important thing, giving my life to Christ, giving my life to Jesus, and that changes everything. You see everybody differently through a different lens when you surrender your life to Christ. You know, but
Yeah.
yeah, but that's what I was taught. That was the main. That's like the main thing. So whether it was a policeman, no matter who it was, just be very careful because they're going to try to stab you in your back.
Hmm.
So yeah. So we have a question from Ann. Hi Ann. It says, I wonder if he now would actually say something. Well, you already answered that. Her question is, now would you say something, and you just answered it. That's something that you're growing in right now,
Yeah.
right? But time of offense, would you say something right now? You
Yeah.
know, and so you're growing in that.
Yeah. And I think that we all, um, I guess the proof is in the pudding,
Mhm.
like I would wish to going forward. Um, I want to. I've given thought to how I might uh, confront stuff like that in the future. I've thought a lot about that moment.
Mhm.
Kind of. I don't know if I would say relived it, but thought back about, and what could have I said, or what could. So I hope that I could and would, but I feel like until I'm presented with that opportunity again. Now, I mean, the Holy Spirit's probably listening right now, and I'm I'm in for it. So, but
Right. Next time you go out to eat, right?
yeah, right. But I
Mhm.
do think that there's a part of it that comes back to faith, just like you said. And if I believe that this is the God that I follow and trust and believe in, and that God um, is with me, and that either the consequences of following Him are worth it, or will be taken care of through that stuff, then faith without works is dead, right? We have to take that leap. And honestly, I think in the circumstances, looking back in my life, where I've been presented opportunities to confront, there's a whole spectrum of cruel or racist behavior, or whatever you want to, like. There's and I think there are moments where, like, I don't know what that is, and or moments where it's like, that was terrible.
Mhm.
um uh I totally lost my train of thought.
Can I throw a
Well,
question in there?
okay, I know what I was going to say.
Good.
I think a lot of times for me personally, there's been a self a self-preservation impulse that if I confront this thing, that might hurt me down the road. This person may be in a position of influence, or maybe in a position of power, or they may have more money than me or whatever. And if I call this out, then I will be less ingratiated to them in the future. Whatever it happens, like if it happens to be related to a job, or whatever.
Wow. That's deep.
Connections. And
That's deep.
I think, I mean, I could be alone in that, but I would guess that there's a lot of people that believe something is wrong, are convicted of it, but don't say something because they're afraid of what that will cost them. And I think that a lot of times, especially, speaking about the prophetic voice, if you're going to speak with prophetic voice, it's going to cost something, probably. And so it does this matter enough to me? Does this matter enough to you to suffer, to do something about? That's, and that is a matter of faith.
Because we know what cast out all fear now.
Yeah.
Perfect love cast out all fear.
And one of the things that's been amazing to me, or fun to me, to see, is often when I've had the courage to bring that prophetic voice, whether it's around, no matter what the specific issue is, right? So, you can speak with prophetic voice about lots of things. When I've had the courage to speak up, there have been times where I've received resistance or consequences, or negative stuff. But the amazing thing, and something that's given me a lot of faith to do it again, or to try to do it again, has been that while there are enemies or haters or whatever that have shown up through the woodwork sometimes, there's also many, many, many new friends and new champions and new allies that show up through the woodwork that I didn't know I had, or I didn't even know was there. And so I think, at least for me personally, that gives me more courage to speak up, to trust that, there are other people who are being quiet too. And if they see or hear someone else, that gives them courage. And then all of a sudden there are more people saying something than I haven't realized. So trusting that, especially as a pastor, has been valuable and helpful.
Yeah, well, that's powerful. Yeah, speak out, because you look at all the prophets in the Bible. You gotta speak out against. You gotta cry loud. Isaiah 58:1. Cry loud and spare not. We gotta call it out. We gotta call out sin. And if we was to lose something, like you said, lose quote unquote white privilege, or lose something, a potential position, whatever, in the future, if we're truly doing right, then God has our back.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, of course, that's easy for me to say my position. But from your position, if you were to continue to, and I know you wrestle with it, but to say that, and probably there are other white people as well who feel the same way, who say, man, I've been wanting to say something, but I was afraid, but they see somebody else. You start a revolution, Chris.
Yeah.
We all
got to do. We all start our own little revolutions, and
right.
We give people around us the courage.
Yeah. Because my issue in my community, when I say my community, well, my issue is I bump into a lot of people who just remain, of course, middle class, and their whole idea is just kind of silence. Just don't rock the boat. Let's just talk about Jesus. Let's not talk about social justice. And and I'm like, you can't separate the two. If the fact, and I think that's part of the problem, we're too comfortable. Nobody wants to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, for me, we start thinking about some of the potential economic fallout from the consequences from saying things that are not liked or appreciated. I certainly recognize my privilege, and I also recognize that I've inherited a lot of I have cultural inheritance, and I like, my dad was a physician, and his dad had a master's degree, and his mother was also had a master's degree as professional. And so I grew up in a family, for example, who it was just expected that one would go to college and become a professional. It wasn't in question. It's what everybody did. It was normal. It wasn't a debate. I didn't face any kind of any of the kind of challenges that someone who, for example, would be like first generation going through. Anyway, so just say, like, I inherited a lot of privilege economically, and I also am in a position economically right now where, I miss, if I were to not have a few paychecks, I mean, we'd be living in the car really
Right.
quick. And so I have some privilege and benefit, and I also am not too many steps away from being in a really bad position. And so I think that vulnerability, while it may not be at the same level of vulnerability as some other people, I think I still feel it. It's still real. And so I think that, it's not like an either, like a black and white thing, or either or, where it's like, either you have vulnerability in that respect, or you have none. Like I think that there is and could be real tangible risk. And so I think sometimes about my family and security, and that I'm not like justifying that. I'm more just describing, some of the feelings that go along with it. And I wonder how many people don't speak up because of like legitimate or somewhat legitimate concerns or worries about the safety and well-being of their family. And I understand how that having that ability to make that choice is privileged.
Yeah.
It's
So,
like all of those things at the same time.
yeah. And so, but well, a few things. I'm gonna get to this question because we got about 7 minutes. But when you give your life to Christ, and because I look at it, when you become a Christian, it's like you sign up to die. Jesus says, supposed to take up your cross and follow me. Paul says, I die daily. So serving Christ is a sacrifice, and we can't black, white, everybody. When we see injustices, when we see evil, it's our job, not as pastors, but as Christians, to have compassion and speak up, because our silence is truly, truly compliance. And we have to speak. And if more and more, if more and more people Christians would do what, and I'm talking to myself as well, do what we're supposed to do, and really, love people, but also correct. Hey, no, that's not right. That would help make a difference in our sphere of. Oh, I know you already know this, and I sphere of influence. But I want to get to this question. Someone put a question, and I let you answer this one. Chris. You see it?
No, which one? I'm
All right.
looking, but
Okay, it says, do you think images of a white Jesus play into systemic racism in the church?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You want to elaborate?
How could it not?
Right.
We create God
And
in
our
our
own
image.
image.
Yeah. I mean, we do it in so many ways. I
Yeah.
think we do it in ways, like, I mean, you've seen I mean, it's a meme, but like the Jesus with the rifle, we create Jesus in our own image. And that's a way to make it so I don't feel like I need to speak up or say anything. If Jesus believes all the same things that I do,
Wow.
then yeah,
Man
I think
created.
I think absolutely.
Yeah. Good question, Dre.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
hear people make observations about how how is it possible that we end up with this Western religion that is white and European
Whitewashed.
centric. Yeah, that's based off of following this Middle Eastern homeless dude. Like
Right.
how does it? This does not compute somehow. So yeah,
Well, I have a theory that I was telling you about yesterday a little bit, but I think that just with just so in Revelation chapter 18, talking about Babylon, the Bible says to come out of her, and we know Babylon is confusion, right? And so racism, you can't be a Christian and racist at the same time. That is confusing. The two don't mix, So I think that in these last days, God is calling us to come out of Babylon, come out of that white supremacist mindset where you could put a white Jesus and say it's okay, where the Bible has been whitewashed and we just accept it. Everybody just accept it, but we all have to come out of that mentality. Racism is not okay. White supremacy is not okay. Anybody being supreme is not okay. We're all children of God, those who accept Jesus. So that's how that has filtered in through the church, because I believe there's a real enemy out there that in that same idea of supremacy that the devil tried to impose in heaven, has brought down to the earth. Right. But we don't have time to get into all of that. But I think we need to look at prophecy different, and
yeah.
race has a part to play in that. But my last question to you, maybe my last question to you is what are you doing? It's two part. What are you doing in your sphere of influence right now to combat social injustice and racism? That's number one, two part. And then number two, what do you say to all of America, all of white America? What would you say?
Um, so I'm doing a few things at the moment.
Okay.
I listened to a
Podcast.
a podcast. There's a guy this week I listened to who has this organization, eight can't wait.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, I
Eight
know.
can't wait. Yeah. So I donated to that campaign. I was really touched by his practicality, and it's very narrowly focused on police brutality. But anyway, so I'm donating to that, something very small, but I was convicted, and so I signed up, and my family, we're going to donate to that organization every month.
Nice.
On my list of things to do there's a bunch of questions that this organization, I think maybe Campaign Zero, maybe more resources that they give, but specific things to ask and talk to local mayors and police agencies about. And I think the guy's name is DeRay.
Okay.
Because his first name is the leader of this, or at least the guy that I heard. But he made a pretty strong argument that, like, especially as it relates to police brutality, that we can accomplish a lot on the local level just by there are these sort of simple, not necessarily easy, but simple practices that we can get put into place that will reduce some of what we're seeing now, and they have research back up. So I'm compelled by that. I can't say that I've begun working on that at the moment, but that's on my list. So there are a couple things I'm doing. I'm continuing to read and to educate myself. My next book on the list is White Fragility. So I'll give you a report on that after I read it, but that's the next one on the list. And I actually, my plan is to have to invite people to be a part of a book club in my church to read that. I don't know how many are going to sign up, but we're gonna put that out there and make the invitation. I'm a preacher, so my last two sermons I talked specifically about racism and systemic injustice. So that's something that I'm doing. I think that there's a part of this that's in.
Do you get a lot of pushback on that?
Huh?
Do you get a lot of do you get a lot of pushback when you preach on those issues?
I've had some follow-up conversations with people, and like I mentioned, I've had a lot of ally type people too who've sort of shown up and said thank you for X, Y, and Z. So I think both, and the conversations where that's been pushback, I've been doing my very best to have those be conversations where we talk and exchange ideas and grow, and hopefully I can be useful in helping people get to the next step. I feel like speaking about sort of the prophetic versus the grace, reconciliation, inclusion, that sort of spectrum of voices. I struggle much less being that person who empathizes and tries to bring people along, and my natural place is a place of grace and a place to find common ground and to find peace. And so I really I flourish in that area. But I feel like in 21st century America, that is a huge area of growth for us collectively as a people, like learning how to listen empathetically to someone else, to learn how to understand someone else's point of view, to potentially disagree on something. I think that we generally, as a just American culture, just speaking across the board, I think we generally don't understand how people change, and we expect things like transformation, like around racism, for example, to happen immediately. And I think that it happens much more slowly, and it happens best in a context of unconditional love and grace. That doesn't mean the absence of confrontation, but unconditional love. And so I think listening empathetically to racist opinions is a part of my work. Not to like legitimize that kind of stuff, but I think that is part of the pathway to growth, is to be heard and receive empathy, and I know that for me, when I've grown, it's been when I've stepped in it, said something offensive, said something cruel, and where someone came alongside of me, not in a confrontational, judgmental, all intense way, but look, man, dude, do you know is this way? Like, those are the moments for me, at least, where I've been able to see myself and to repent, as it were, and then later to grow. I'm trying to teach my kids. I mean, I mentioned part of the reason we wanted to move to California was to be in a more diverse environment. That's intentional. I want my kids to, and not that it's like some kind of panacea. I mean, you talked about growing up in New York, and which is obviously very diverse. Like you know, it's not just an automatic thing. But I'm hopeful that raising my kids in an environment where it's possible to interact with lots of different people with lots of different perspectives will be good for them. I talked to I didn't take my son to the protest on Saturday. You know, I had all expectations that it would be, you know, a peaceful protest, and that's how the conversation and the invitations were about it, but I wasn't sure. So I didn't take my kids, but we talked about it, and I showed them videos, and we talked about why it was happening. And so I wish to educate my kids and, you know, to not give them the kinds of phrases that I heard growing up. And so those are some of the things that I'm trying to do. Oh, another one that I've been doing the last week is I said yes to your, you know, invitation to have conversation, but I've been resisting the urge to inject my opinion into this wider conversation, because while watching, I watched the video of George Floyd, for example, being killed, and Ahmaud Arbery, I watched that as well, and it was horrific and awful and painful to watch. I'm cognizant of the fact that it means something different for me to watch that, and for me to even talk about how terrible. And I don't, yeah. So I don't want to cause more pain by going on the internet and bellowing about how terrible it was to watch that, because I'm aware enough to know that when I watch that, it comes across to me and means to me something different than someone from the Black community watching.
Yeah, it's just like a compound that's compounding pain. And so it definitely, I can see in different contexts. But Chris, I want to know what is your message? What do you say to all the white America, all white Christians? What is your message that they could take away from this? What is your charge?
Listen.
Okay.
Listen. Like, shut up and listen. If you're not having a conversation with someone who's Black, or someone who's someone who's Black, if you're not having a conversation and just listening to stories and to what it feels like, this isn't going to go away. Right. And you're probably part of the problem. Like, listen, just listen. Like, you don't have to be convinced. You don't have to agree. Just listen. Just have a conversation. Like, maybe not in person. I don't know. Maybe over the internet. But these conversations, I have some pastors who I'm friends with that are, just down the road, and they've been doing just live conversations and a lot of storytelling. And man, I know for them, the stories that they're telling are not novel or new, but for me to be able to listen in and hear is, I think it's really important for me. So that would be my encouragement, is to listen. Just listen. And I'm also mindful that, like, there's trauma here, and it's not fair and this is something that, we've talked about as a pastoral staff, like, well, should we invite conversations and whatever? And I'm mindful that, like, I don't, like, there's someone, this is a different category, but there's a person in our congregation who survived the genocide in Rwanda. And I think it's fine to talk to that person and say, hey, would you be willing to share your experience? But I would only do that with a great deal of care and concern and contextualizing, and I would want to protect that person if they were going to take on, because it's just reopening those wounds. And I don't know if the white community has that same sort of sensitivity around Black folks in America and their experience with systemic racism. And so I'm sensitive to, I don't want to re-traumatize. I don't want, like, this isn't entertainment. This is not. So, just speaking to folks, like, just like, listen, yes, but like, don't be
Listen with empathy.
It's not your privilege to hear. Like, if someone wishes to tell you and someone has the grace to want to share with you their experience, for God's sake, listen. But like, certainly it's not your right to be told. It's not your right to be educated. Like, there's lots and lots of stuff out there where you can educate yourself. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that maybe I'm deconstructing myself.
Yeah. Well, you're fine. Well, listen. That's big. Yeah, that's your message to all white America, all America.
All
Period.
white America.
Just listen. Listen.
Just listen. Yeah.
With empathy. Listen.
Yeah.
So that's big. That's big. All right. So yeah. I thank you so much, Chris, for the conversation, man. I definitely appreciate you, man. But yeah, let's I don't know if we started off with prayer. I think I prayed. But go ahead. Can you close us out with prayer?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's pray.
No, I asked you to close us out with prayer.
Right. I'm praying. I always start with silence. So I'm
okay. Oh, my bad. I didn't know if you.
Sorry.
I don't know if the connection was bad. Or
no, it's good. All right. Well, let's be silent for a minute.
Okay.
Dear Jesus, I'll speak for myself. I'm grateful for this conversation, and I'm grateful for Keenan's grace in inviting me to speak and to learn and to hear. And I'm grateful for the questions and voices of those that I've seen on the chat, who have been gracious and pointed and confrontational in the best of ways. And I pray that you continue to be in my life and in the lives of the members, the people in my church that I get the privilege of walking through life with. I pray that you are with us all and help us to grow and to change and to become more like you every day. And I pray that we have the courage and the courage to stick with each other in the process, and that we also have the courage to hold our feet to the fire, that we could actually be more like you. And I pray the same for Keenan and his church and his leadership. Please help us to hold those standards up of your unflinching way of love, and also your grace and unconditional love for all of us along the way. Jesus, I pray for healing and intervention, especially in America, where we have such a history and such a present of injustice, and just layers and layers of problems and systems that yield the suffering even today, even right now. Please give us the wisdom and the courage to know how to act and what to do and what would be the most constructive. And man, I pray for faith that you would help us to know deeply that you are with us and that you'll take care of us all along the way. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So such a gift to get to visit and take part. And truly, God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you too, man. I'm gonna give you a call later, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's follow up, and hopefully I didn't step in it too bad.
No, you did great. You did great. All right, everybody. Well, God bless, and we have another conversation, color conversation, tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern time. So see you all tomorrow. God bless.
God
All right,
bless.
thanks, Chris.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.